So today's topic is called Work Done Well, Patterns in Craftsmanship and Creativity. And there's something when I am in a building or a business where there's something, you kind of just feel that something special is happening. When I'm around someone who's really good at their work, the watercolor artist last night was an example of this, just like, man, this guy is really good at his job. Or sometimes it's buying a product and using a product, and I'm just like, wow, this is just really well made, or I'm grateful somebody put the time, energy, and thought into making this great product. And I want more of that in my life. I want that experience when somebody walks in this business. I want it when Craig comes as a guest. I want it when somebody comes in for a trial day the first time to think like, wow, there's something different here. And I want it when we come to work every day, that it feels like a place where things are well done and there's an intentional plan behind it. And I want customers to experience our floors that way. And I want to feel like my life has meaning and I'm working towards mastering something. And I think that's a shared thought that a lot of us have. Sergio, you're the newest one here. When you walked in this business for the first time, what's the first thing that you noticed? Or if you could just share one thing about what you noticed about Dancer. Like you get in your car, your girl's like, how was it? What'd you notice? What would be the thing that you would say?
Definitely good people around.
Yeah.
Felt welcomed. When I walked in here, everything looked organized, professional. When we got to the work site and we got the working and stuff, it was not like you were getting rushed around, just take your time, do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Overall though, it's been going really well. It's good, compared to the other jobs that I've had.
Yep, so first time in here, stops in for an interview. It wasn't planned, he just stopped by, introduced himself, got walked around, probably introduced to 8 people. And pretty friendly people, noticed a clean, organized environment. So what do you think, and now we can help him with this, but if he experiences that, what do you think's going on in his mind overall about like the company overall? Like what are some thoughts? Like for example, I would say like, oh, there's probably a process to how they do things. There's probably opportunities, or the people here probably worked here for a while if they're this welcoming or saying what's up. Like if we were just filled with all temporary helpers, that wouldn't happen, right? So if you're someone that wants to like, hey man, I want to get somewhere where I can actually stay and work hard and be rewarded and like be part of something. If I see those standards, I'd be like, oh yeah, like that's where I want to be. If I was someone like, oh, I want to be somewhere where I can milk it or hide, or I just need to, make sure somebody gets off my back and I get a job, you'd be like, oh, this probably isn't the spot because there's standards, right? Like you can't hide. And we get these feelings when we experience things. The question that I ask myself, and that is going to shape the topic of today, is, I'm pretty ordinary, but I want to do things really well. And understanding how do ordinary people develop the capacity to do exceptional or the best work is what frames this question. And through my working life, I've recognized that there's patterns, just like seeing the standards here, that lead to results. And so today's topic is Work Done Well, Patterns in Craftsmanship and Creativity. How do ordinary people develop the capacity to do best work? I think it's actually patterns in craftsmanship and creativity that lead to those results. And so as I talk about today, we're going to talk about the word craftsmanship, because I think the idea of craftsmanship is what leads to this. I think that people that take a craftsmanship approach to their work do develop the opportunity to do the best work. And craftsmanship is not just what we think about a person working with their hands, which is what we do in our business, but if we think about it as an approach to everything we take on, I think it can deliver these results. And so there's 5 foundations in craftsmanship as I see it. The first one is discernment. Discernment is to see what matters and respond appropriately. Discipline is to consistently do what matters, whether it's hard or inconvenient. Presence is to give ourselves fully to the moment. Creativity is to bring order, beauty, and to see what's possible. And humility means that we're always going to learn, that we never feel like we arrived. And for today's topic, we're not going to go through all this, but we're just going to hang out in discernment. So everything we talk about today is just starting in this discernment here. And so one of the first ways I started recognizing discernment in my own life came through an uninvited adventure in my life with a miter saw. So a couple years ago, I used a miter saw and I was cutting a piece of wood and I went down with the miter saw, and when I went down, I heard a tick and then something flew into my eye. And instinctively, I put my hand up to my eye to get it out of my eye. And when I pulled my hand down, my hand was wet and I could see blood. The thing was, I wasn't cut, and at this point, I didn't even know you could actually bleed from your actual eyeball. So there's an optometrist office just down the road, and I've driven past it probably 1,000 times. And it's been one of those things you like know it's there, but you don't pay any attention to it. My body went into some kind of strange autopilot, and I instinctively knew that's exactly where I need to be. So I hopped in my truck, I started driving, I called Lexi on the way, and I said, hey babe, do you think I'm gonna look sexy with an eye patch? It was my way to process fear. I was scared, she was terrified, and she also said, why are you driving if your eye is bleeding? So I walk into this optometrist's office. I've never been there before. It's a very quiet office, like elevator music, people on their cell phones. There's nothing going on. And I walk right up to the counter and I say, hello, my name is Nick Dancer. I've been in an accident. I've never been here before, but I need help. My eye is bleeding. And as soon as I finished that last sentence, my body started getting hot. Like I felt like I had a fever. I started feeling the pulse or my heartbeat, and I started feeling it in my eye. And I started thinking like, oh no, every time my heart beats, my eye is squirting out blood. And I start like kind of having a panic attack. And so the room starts spinning. I'm in this office and I fall on the floor. I didn't pass out, I just couldn't stand up anymore. They get me to a chair, they take out the piece of brass from my eye, and all is well. My eye is fully healed. It turned all sorts of colors during the healing process. But what they said to me was that this is one of those instances where like a 16th inch over and it would have caused permanent damage. See, the brass went into the white part of my eye, which I guess can take a beating, but the colored part is where damage can happen. And so what I thought in that moment was that, oh, a 16th inch matters. And so that prompted that, well, a 16th inch matters because, you know, it's the difference between seeing and not seeing. But through further reflection, I realized that a 16th inch matters sometimes, that there's context to when a 16th inch matters. Because if that same piece of brass hit my arm, a 16th inch doesn't matter. It probably wouldn't even cut the skin. Whether it hit me on my thumb or my shoulder, it wouldn't have mattered. If it hit my pants leg, it wouldn't have mattered. That a 16th inch matters in the right context. And I think that's what the people that do the best work, we all have a limited time, attention, and capacity. They know where a 16th inch matters because it matters sometimes. I think there's a difference between knowing when another hour at a job is going to be the difference between moving a job forward a day or it's just pure waste. A 16th inch matters, or you know when to pay attention to a detail or where that detail actually isn't important in this context and we need to keep things moving forward. And that's where experience comes in, is we have this lived experience, or I have this lived experience, to know that, hey, a 16th inch matters sometimes. The one thing is, when we're beginners, we actually think it never matters. We think like, that detail doesn't matter. When we're amateurs, we completely switch and we say a 16th inch matters all the time, and we bring an intensity to every detail. But a master knows when to pay attention, when roughness is accepted, when details are accepted. And that's what I learned through my experience, is that a 16th inch matters sometimes, that the context matters, and the people who do the best work know the ebb and flow of when those things. Now, as much as I learned through this experience, I would rather have fewer of these in my life, and I'd like to learn more from the examples of other people. Now, this is an example for you guys, so you don't have to go live that experience. The other thing I learned in context matters is wearing safety glass matters. That all this could have been avoided with a pair of safety glasses. So when I think about examples of other people, something that comes to my mind is the story of James Cash Penney. So before J.C. Penney became a mega retail merchant in America for a certain amount of years, James Cash Penney worked at a store called Johnson & Callahan, and it was a dry goods store. And they took him on a buying trip to New York. And during this buying trip to New York, They met with a vendor that gave him a fabric, and he said, this fabric is color fast. And before what we know as fabrics now, if you'd wash a fabric, sometimes the colors would pull out. And so when they got back to the hotel room, James Cash Penney wrung the clothing out, the fabric sample out, and he hung it over a tub to dry. And when his boss saw this, he said, James, what are you doing? And he said, I have to know for myself that these fabrics are color fast. And his boss said, James, if you act like that, you're never going to make it as a big merchant. And he said, I can't tell my customers in good faith that this product is color fast unless I know for myself. And one of the things about him is he didn't wait for a customer to complain that they weren't color fast. He didn't wait for the call back or rework. He took the preparation steps needed because he had to know for himself. And that's because he operated with a conviction that his conviction and integrity wasn't just passing along integrity for somebody else, but he had to know for himself. And for him in that context, that was one of those moments where every detail matters. So most people are going to accept that they said it, it's good to go, move forward. I think we've experienced that with our vendors before. But he verified, and that's another level of discernment too, is knowing when you need to have that lived experience of knowing how something actually works. So as part of all these things, as we get back to the idea of craftsmanship, is a lot of times people think craftsmanship is something that, again, is long gone or belongs to a previous generation. But I've seen craftsmanship, and the craftsmen I look up to actually live in this business. I've seen young men who have never used a screwdriver, never even been part of a sports team, turn into leaders who are leading our teams and working on some very high-end detailed work right now. I've seen people that have maybe considered themselves sloppy, become men of great design and detail. And I think that there's something in craftsmanship beyond just doing your work well that helps you be someone that can do the best work. And there's a quote by a guy named Eugene Peterson. So Eugene Peterson was a pastor. He also spent 10 years after he retired translating the Bible from its original language into a conversational language called the Message Bible. So 10 years of interpreting the Bible. And he said that the mark of a certain type of genius is the ability and energy to keep returning to the same task, relentlessly, imaginatively, curiously, for a lifetime. And I think that when we see people or products or experiences that are really well done, there's something in there, there's this relentlessness that is part of their craftsmanship that helps us experience this. And the other part of this is that sometimes there's also patterns beyond how things are well done. And so when we think about even that watercolor class I was at yesterday, his work looks almost impossible, and then he shows us the first step, and then he shows us the pattern, and he says, oh, how to achieve these results is this, this, and this, and then the work comes alive. And so one of the things in our business we're working through is the difference between 0 and 1 inches on most tape measures is broke down into 1/16 of an inch. So there's a tape measure, and we'll pass it around, but we can see all those little notches. And I think to be a great craftsman in our business, it would be neat for everyone in our company to know what these measurements are from 1/16 to 1 inch in the correct lowest common factors. That's 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, 5/16. And so when somebody asks you to grab a 1/2 inch socket, you know where it sits. If somebody says, hey, is that floor 3/16 or 1/8, we actually know the difference between those things. And I think this is important because it shows a level of craftsmanship, and also in our business, sometimes that 1/16 inch does matter. On a precast terrazzo tread, that 1/16 on a depth can matter. On a flooring system, a 1/16 inch change in thickness can be, if we take true PC, a 1/16 inch difference could be the difference between an extra skid of product or the product holding up well or starting to crack too early. And so that can be a really important part of our business. So I'm going to teach you guys the framework associated with how to learn this. And I know a couple of you guys have been through it already, but once you understand The pattern, the idea is it can actually be as easy as counting to 116, 1 through 16, when you know the pattern. So we're going to do it 1 16, 2 16s, 3 16s, and we're just going up by a 16th every time. So this is as easy as counting. Twelve, 16. Okay, so if we go back to, I think, 4th or 5th grade, we learned fractions. And so we see 1/16, that is at its lowest common factor. So we can't take that down any further. That's where it needs to be. So that one's done. 2/16, well, I can divide that by 8 on both. So if I divide both those numbers by 8, I would get 1, 8, okay? 3/16, I can't take that down any longer. That's stuck there. 4/16, well, I can divide that once and I'd have 2 8s, but we don't say 2 8s. I can actually take it down one more. So I divide that by 4 and I got 1/4. So you can see the pattern we're starting to make here. 5/16, I'm done. 6/16, 3 8s, 7/16. What other patterns are you guys starting to notice as I fill this out? Is there anything else you guys are starting to notice?
1 8, 2 8, 3 8.
Yep.
Counts by 8.
And then this one will be our longest one. I'm going to divide this out by 4 8s, 2 4s, 1/2 inch. I'm also starting to notice that any of my odd numbers actually can't break down anymore. So anytime there's an odd number, I know it stays at the 16th. I'm also seeing this pattern of sizing that looks eerily similar to the tape measure as well. So that tape measure is starting to mean that all my really short ones are a 16th. My little bit bigger ones are an 1/8. Those ones are a 1/4. That's the 1/2 inch line. And this pattern repeats itself all the way through. 12/16, 6 8, 3/4, 13/16, 7 8, 15/16, 1 inch. So now I know that I have a framework to practice. So I can recognize 1/16. I don't say that. I say 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, 5/16, 3 8, 7/16, 1/2 inch, 9/16, 5 8, 11. And now I could look at this, and we're not going to do this, but Baldo on a Friday, we did this exercise, and then he turned like this, and it's like, all right, 1/16, 2, 1/8, 3/16, 4/4, and that's how it feels the first time you go through it. That's how we're all going to do it. But the thing is, once you build that pattern in once, you do it again, you build it in again, you build it in again. Over the weekend, without looking at this again and just thinking about that process while he drove and while he was in the shower, he went from over 3 minutes to 8.5 seconds, which is now the company record in a couple days. And that's why this is a challenge for us, is because, not because it's impossible to learn and only a few can learn it, it's that every single person, no matter how ordinary we are, has the capacity to learn this. We just probably haven't been taught. You know, it was up until the last year that I actually learned this, but my whole life I had been around mechanical things and somebody asking me to grab the right wrench or what sizes, and I didn't really know. I just grab a bunch of wrenches and wiggle them until one of them worked. But there's actually a pattern to what this is. So if somebody says, hey, is that floor 3 8 or 3/4? I didn't used to know which one was bigger. I don't know, I'd have to like write it out or think about it. Or is 13/16 going to match up to what we have? Like, I don't know, I'd have to like really do some work. But now with this framework, it's one of those things, I believe, kind of like riding a bike, that once you learn it and practice it, you might not always be able to hit 16 seconds. The goal is that we know it in under 16 seconds, but that, I will know this the rest of my life. And the reason we have the 16-second goal is because you can practice it in a way that you can remember it once, but by the time you hit 16 seconds, you have to know it so well that it is like counting, that it's almost like not thinking about it. And we have the challenge hat associated with this task too. So Nate and Mitch complimented me on my hat today. This is open to you guys as well. But I do believe it's something that with about 3 hours of practice, most people are going to be able to navigate it. And I think sometimes we think like we jump into something without knowing the pattern behind something, and then we try to figure it out and we can't understand why it's not working. Or we see somebody who's really good at something and we can say, I could never do that because they're so skilled. Most of the time, people are working in some kind of pattern recognition. So in music, for example, I have a friend that understands music enough that when he hears music, he knows what the chord structure is, and he can play almost anything with a guitar and pick it up because he understands that the music follows a pattern, that most music follows a handful of chords and they're in a different rhythm and cadence. And so he can audibly listen to music and then learn it and play it. I cannot do that because I don't understand the pattern behind it, but he does. In accounting, Chelsea, debits and credits. The first time I learned about accounting, debits and credits, I'm like, this makes no sense. I thought money left your bank account and that's it. But in business, when we run a profit and loss statement or a balance sheet, every transaction that happens in our business has a corresponding debit or credit. And the first time I learned about that, it was very confusing. Now I've learned the patterns with it that Chelsea and I can have conversations about what's debited and what's credited to match up. And so just recognize that a lot of times when people are doing something at a high level, there are patterns behind it. And in a lot of ways, very similar to this measurement, that we can learn the patterns. So as we think about work done well, we all have different gifts. We all have different abilities. We all have different responsibilities. But we all have the same opportunity. I think the one is that we can reflect on our own experiences. We all bring different experiences and what we've learned through those experiences. We can learn through the example of people that have gone before us. We could watch videos, we can read books, we can listen to things that a lot of people are sharing their examples and experiences so we can learn. I don't have to learn this myself, I can learn through someone else's story. We can search for patterns in the work that we're doing and trying to understand people that have gone before, and are there patterns that we can learn a framework from. And then I think that all of it comes down to, if we want to be great or be the type of people that work done well, that discernment, the idea of understanding what this moment requires and responding appropriately, helps us be good stewards of the work that we've been given and contributes to work done well. And that is our monthly. We'll go to the board.